It was the kind of chance most people only dream about. He had worked long hours, skipped weekends, and said yes to every extra task just to get his name noticed. And now, finally, it had paid off. A real invite to a big event where the top names in the business would be talking deals, shaking hands, and opening doors that could change careers forever. He couldn't believe it when he got the email. It felt like proof. He was finally getting somewhere. After years of being stuck in the background, this was his moment to step up and show who he really was. But what made it even better was that he didn't have to go alone. She had been by his side through all the ups and downs, the long nights when he came home too tired to talk, the mornings when he left before the sun was up. She never complained. In fact, she always cheered him on, reminding him why he started all this in the first place. When he told her about the event, she lit up with excitement, not because of the glam or the scene, but because she knew how much it meant to him. Without thinking twice, she asked if she could come too. At first, he hesitated, not because he didn't want her there, but because he knew the crowd. Sharp suits, sharper looks, people who measured success in titles and net worth. He was still climbing, still proving himself. He didn't want her to feel out of place, or worse, embarrassed. But she wasn't asking for anything flashy, just wanted to be there for him. To cheer from the sidelines, maybe grab his hand if things got tense. He gave in. Of course he did. And secretly, he was glad. Even though he wouldn't admit it, standing next to her made him feel braver. Like no matter what happened that night, at least he wouldn't be alone. Still, as the day got closer, the worry crept back in. What if she didn't fit in? What if she felt awkward? What if she realized how different their worlds really were? He kept those thoughts to himself, smiled more than he felt like, told himself it would be okay. The truth was, he thought, she'd be fine, just not in the way he expected. But that part hadn't happened yet. For now, they were both excited, getting dressed, fixing hair, checking reflections in the mirror. She wore something simple but beautiful. He looked sharp, nervous energy buzzing beneath the surface. As they walked out the door together, holding hands like always, neither of them knew exactly what the night had in store. They were about to find out. The moment they walked into that room, it was like stepping into another world. Bright lights, tall ceilings, music soft enough to talk over but loud enough to keep things moving. People were laughing, sipping fancy drinks, shaking hands with big smiles and quiet competition behind their eyes. She looked around, not with nerves, but with curiosity. She didn't know these people or their titles, but she could feel the energy, like being in a school cafeteria on the first day, except everyone here wore suits and tried a little harder to look confident. He, on the other hand, felt like he had just stepped onto a stage without rehearsing. This was where he needed to shine, where one conversation could change everything. He straightened his back, gave her a quick smile, and pulled her gently through the crowd. At first, he introduced her. "This is, my partner," he said more than once, never quite sure what word fit best. She came along for support. People smiled politely, nodded, said, "Nice to meet you," and then moved on quickly, eyes already scanning the room for someone bigger, louder, or more important. It didn't take long for him to drift into conversations that left her standing quietly by his side. She didn't mind at first. She knew this was his night, his chance, but as time passed, she started to feel invisible. Not in a mean way, just forgotten, like she wasn't part of the game being played around her. The topics shifted to deals, markets, numbers she didn't recognize. And when she tried to listen, to understand, it felt like watching a movie in a language she only half knew. Still, she smiled, watched, listened. And slowly, without trying, she began to notice things. Who talked too much and who hardly spoke, who laughed too loudly and who stood alone, She saw the tension in some faces, the hidden pressure behind polite greetings. There was more going on in that room than anyone let on. She wandered off for a moment, giving him space, grabbed a drink from the table, watched the lights dance across the floor. A few people glanced at her, probably wondering who she was, but instead of shrinking under their looks, she just took a slow sip and held her ground. She wasn't there to impress anyone. She was just there, for him. Even if he didn't realize how much she was seeing, how much she was learning. Because while he was busy trying to belong, she was starting to understand the game itself, and sometimes knowing the rules before everyone else is the most powerful seat in the house. The night had settled into its rhythm. People were deeper into conversations now, drinks in hand, laughter bouncing off the walls. Deals were being whispered about like secrets. The room was full of power plays and polite smiles. He was finally starting to feel like he belonged, talking with people who mattered, nodding at the right moments, trying not to look too eager. He could feel the momentum, like he was getting closer to something real, something that might actually change things for him. She was still nearby, quietly watching. Not bored, just taking it all in. Then, without warning, everything changed. The lights went out, not just one or two flickering bulbs. Total darkness, like someone hit a switch and swallowed the room whole. A few gasps, a couple of nervous laughs. Someone bumped into another person and muttered an apology. At first, it felt like a joke, maybe part of the show, but when no lights came back on, the mood shifted. Something wasn't right. Then came the sound. A choking noise, a struggle, a chair tipping over. People started moving fast but didn't know where to go. Call someone. Is there a doctor? Here. What's happening? Panic doesn't always scream. Sometimes it creeps in through confusion, through voices rising, footsteps rushing, and nobody really knowing what to do. He stood frozen. His mind raced, but his body didn't follow. He wanted to help. He wanted to do something. But he couldn't think clearly. He looked around, even, though he couldn't see much, searching for someone else to step in. And then, from somewhere in the dark, she moved. No hesitation, no fear. She found the person on the floor, dropped to her knees, and started acting fast, checking breathing, feeling for blockage, recognizing the signs. Without thinking, she did what needed to be done. Around her, people stood still, confused, waiting. Some tried to help but didn't know how. One guy held up his phone for light. Another shouted for security. But she didn't stop. She pushed through the panic with quiet confidence. And within seconds, the thing that had everyone scared was gone. The theatre person coughed, then breathed. Gasps turned to sighs of relief. Someone clapped. Others thanked her without knowing her name. Still on the floor, she stayed until the person was okay, gave them water, made sure they sat up slowly. By the time the lights came back on, people weren't just relieved. They were in awe. Standing in the middle of it all, she looked exactly like someone who had just saved the night. And somewhere, nearby, he watched, heart pounding. Not just because of the drama, but because for the first time, he saw her in a light he'd never seen before, and he wasn't sure what to do with that feeling. The lights came back on like nothing had happened, but everything had changed. There she was, still crouched beside the person who had just choked, helping them sit up. Her hands were steady, her voice calm. Around her, people stood frozen, some with phones still raised, others whispering in shock. Someone started clapping, then more joined in, not loud or forced, but real, the kind of applause that comes from relief, gratitude, maybe even a little awe. She looked up, a bit surprised, like she hadn't expected anyone to notice how fast she'd moved or how sure she'd been. She smiled, gently, not like someone showing off, but like someone who had just done what needed to be done. He stood nearby, still trying to catch his breath. Not because he had run anywhere, but because something inside him had shifted. He had come to this event thinking he had to prove himself, that he had to be the one to make things happen, to impress, to step up. And then, without saying a word, she did exactly that. Not for power, not for credit, just because it was the right thing to do. It didn't take long before people started asking her questions. Do you have medical training? Where did you learn that? That was incredible. One man, older, wearing a suit that probably cost more than most people made in a month, stepped forward. He introduced himself as someone who used to work in emergency care. He asked her exactly what she had done and when. She explained it simply. No jargon, no bragging, just clear steps, the way she always explained things. He nodded, clearly impressed. You saved someone tonight, he said. Honestly, I don't think enough people know how to react like that. Around them, the party slowly started moving, again. People returned to their drinks, the music kicked back in, and laughter floated through the room once more. But now, wherever she went, eyes followed, not with judgment or distance, but with respect. People who had ignored her earlier now greeted her with warm smiles. Some even pulled her into conversations. A woman in a red dress asked if she taught kids. Another man, a local business owner, thanked her for reminding everyone that sometimes heroes don't wear capes. And he watched all of it without interrupting, without stepping in. Because for the first time, he realized that strength isn't always loud or flashy. Sometimes it's quiet. Sometimes it shows up when nobody expects it. And sometimes it belongs to the person you already knew best, just in a way you never saw before. As the night kept going, he found himself standing a little closer to her, not to protect her, but to be near someone who had just proven that being brave doesn't mean knowing everything. Sometimes it just means knowing what to do when the lights go out. The night kept moving, but the energy had changed. It wasn't just a party anymore. It was her story now. The one where someone who walked in quietly ended up doing something unforgettable. People who hadn't given her a second glance earlier were now pulling her into conversations. One woman thanked her for stepping in when nobody else knew what to do. A man in a dark suit, who looked like he owned half the room, asked if she ever considered volunteering at community events. Said people needed more like her. She laughed it off gently, said she was just glad she could help. But the truth was, everyone wanted to know her now, and as they talked, as she smiled and listened, he stood nearby, not cutting in, not trying to take over, but watching. He couldn't stop thinking about how fast things had shifted. Only an hour ago he was worried she wouldn't fit in, that she'd feel out of place, that she'd be ignored, maybe even embarrassed. Now, she was the reason people remembered the night at all. It made him feel proud, sure, but also weirdly small, not because he was jealous, not exactly, but because for so long he thought success looked a certain way. Big titles, confident talk, shaking hands with the right people. He thought that was what mattered, and here she was, proving that sometimes the most powerful thing you can bring to a room is simply knowing how to care. Later, someone tapped him on the shoulder. An older man, someone he had been trying to meet all night. I saw what your friend did, the man said. That was incredible. He nodded, unsure what to say. I have to admit, the man went on, I didn't know who she was at first, but I do now. And honestly, that kind of presence, you can't buy that. You can't fake that. Then he gave him a business card. Said to reach out sometime. Just like that. Normally, he would have felt like he'd won something, but instead, he just felt quiet. Like maybe the real win wasn't about him tonight. Maybe it was about seeing someone you love do something brave, and realizing that strength doesn't always look the way you expect. As the night wore on, people started asking her for photos. Some wanted to shake her hand again. Others just wanted to say thanks. And every time, she handled it with grace. No ego, no show, She never once acted like she was better than anyone else. She just stayed herself. The same person who made tea when he had a rough day, who laughed at bad jokes, who held his hand when he was nervous. Except now, the whole room saw what he already knew, that she was someone special, even if he hadn't realized just how special until tonight. As the night slowed down, so did they. The music was still playing, the lights were back on, and people were still talking. But now it felt more relaxed, like everyone had already experienced the main event, and everything after was just wrapping up the feeling. They found themselves outside, away from the noise. The city hummed softly around them, the kind of quiet that comes late at night when most of the world is tired, but not quite asleep. They didn't say much at first, just walked side by side, hands together. The kind of silence that wasn't awkward, just needed. Then he finally spoke. I thought. He started, then stopped. She looked at him, waiting. He took a breath. I thought tonight would be about me proving something. She smiled a little, not in a mean way, but like she understood what he meant. And I thought you might feel out of place, he admitted. Like maybe. This wasn't your world. She didn't argue. She just nodded. I guess I was wrong, he said quietly. She chuckled gently. Yeah, you were. It wasn't harsh. It was just true. And somehow, hearing her say it so easily made it easier for him to accept. They kept walking. I don't even know why I thought that, he said. You've always been good at stuff like that, helping people, knowing what to do. But tonight, he shook his head. Tonight felt different. She nodded again, slower this time. It's weird, he went on. I spent all night trying to make people see me, trying to fit in, and you didn't even try, and everyone saw you. She gave his hand a soft squeeze. You think I was nervous? She asked. Because I was. I didn't know anyone. I didn't have anything to offer anyone here. But I also knew something else, she said. That sometimes being seen doesn't come from talking the loudest or knowing the right people. Sometimes it comes from just showing up and doing the right thing when it matters. He let that sink in. I guess I forgot that, he said. She smiled. You didn't forget. You just haven't learned it yet. He laughed a little. They stopped near the edge of the sidewalk, looking out at the city lights. Cars passed slowly, neon signs flickered above shops, and somewhere nearby, a street musician played a soft tune. He turned to her. Thank you, he said, for tonight, for being there, for doing what you did. She looked back, eyes steady. Any time, she said. And not just for saving someone, but for reminding me of what really matters. She didn't say anything else. She didn't need to. Sometimes, the best lessons don't come from speeches or big moments. Sometimes they come from watching someone you love do something brave, without even realizing how brave it was. And as the city kept moving around them, so did something. Inside him, a change, small but real. The next few days were different, not in a loud way, not like fireworks or big changes. But little things started to shift. The way he looked at her, the way he listened when she talked, the way he didn't always try to take control of every situation. Something had changed inside him, and everyone around them began to notice it too. At work, people still talked about the event, not about deals or who got promoted, but about her, about how she stepped in when nobody else could. Some even asked if she'd ever considered volunteering for community training sessions, said she had a calm kind of strength that people needed to learn from. She laughed it off again, like she always did, said she was just glad she could help. But deep down, she felt something too. It wasn't about being famous or getting attention. It was more like remembering that sometimes you don't have to shout to be heard. Sometimes all it takes is knowing what to do and doing it without fear. Back at her job, word spread quickly. A few of the teachers had seen photos online. One student even came up to her with wide eyes and said, "Miss, my mom showed me what you did." She smiled, a little embarrassed, but also touched. "You would have done the same," she told the kid. "Yeah, but you actually did it." That made her think. Maybe courage isn't about being fearless. Maybe it's about moving anyway, even when your heart is pounding and you're not sure if anyone will notice. He noticed. He saw how she handled the attention, how she never let it change her. He watched how she stayed grounded, how she kept showing up for others the same way she always had. And he realized something important. Being strong doesn't mean having power. It means using what you know to help someone else. One morning before work, he left a note on her desk. Just a small piece of paper folded neatly beside her coffee mug. Inside, it said, "You were the hero of my night too." Nothing else. No big speech. No fancy words. Just truth. And maybe that was the most powerful thing either of them had done yet. Because sometimes love isn't only about being there for each other. Sometimes it's about seeing each other clearly for who we really are, and realizing that maybe, just maybe, you were never the one leading the way. Maybe they were.